This episode of the Card Insiders podcast is brought to you by Omnisend. Omnisend is a powerful marketing automation platform specifically built for e-commerce businesses. With easy-to-use visual automation workflows, customer segmentation, 24/7 support, multiple channels including SMS, and built-in integrations with key e-commerce platforms such as Shopify and Shopify Plus, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, and Magento, Omnisend enables marketers to effectively grow their business without costing a fortune. Who says marketing automation has to be expensive? Learn more about how Omnisend can help you maximize your data and grow your sales at omnisend.com. Welcome, everyone, to Season 2 of the Card Insiders podcast. I'm your host, Greg Zakwitz. This season, I'll be speaking with e-com professionals to help you get your online business ready for the holiday season. For today's topic, we are discussing paid search and paid social. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to kindly ask you to tell your friends and colleagues about us and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you have any email marketing questions, comments, or are interested in sharing your own email marketing or e-commerce story, we would love to hear from you, and you can email us at podcast@omnisend.com. Now, let's jump into today's episode where I welcome the show digital strategist and VP of Partnerships at Hawke Media, Ashley Scorpio. Welcome to the show, Ashley. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
So Ashley, I never mention anyone's last name unless it's in the context of me butchering it during the intro. You might have the coolest last name of anyone I've spoken with on the podcast here. It almost sounds like a fake radio name or like a superhero name. Do you get that a lot?
I do. I also get perhaps a Bond villain at times.
Okay, I could see that.
Let's go with superhero.
Okay, there you go. I was going to say, do you go more superhero or villain side just in your day-to-day?
I'm all about the heroes. Definitely. I'd say Captain America is probably one of my favorite Marvel, at least Marvel Universe heroes.
Very cool. Next week, I'm going to see your LinkedIn profile and you're going to be wearing like this huge elaborate outfit or whatever.
Or a cape, at least.
Exactly. Everyone needs a cape. Ashley, I was telling you offline that you have the unpleasant experience of having to jam just a ton of content into a very short period of time. So we're going to try to focus on kind of some of these high level, maybe easy wins, as opposed to the niche down strategies. I'm sure people can always follow up with you and Hawke if they want some of those strategies as well, but try to make it a little more applicable and practical for people listening today. Just very quickly before we kind of jump in this, can you give us a little bit of a background about who Hawke Media is and the types of companies you guys work with?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hawke Media is an award-winning digital marketing agency and consultancy. We're based in LA with offices in New York and Boston. Although these days, we're all working remotely from home, and we offer custom data-driven marketing strategies to businesses of all sizes. And all of the managed marketing services that we provide are on a month-to-month a la carte basis. And part of our philosophy is affordable and accessible, excellent marketing for everyone. So we actually have a good number of our clients that are startups or in the SMB space, but we certainly work with some larger clients as well, up to growth stage companies. We've been in business for about 7 years, and we've worked with over 1,500 brands during that time. And at this point in time, I think we're over 150 full-time employees.
Very nice. Great background. So we'll obviously have contact info in the episode description, and we'll get to that later as well. So thank you for the background there, Ashley. Let's jump into it here. So it's the usual talking point this year is that there's just kind of a lot of uncertainty about the season, but we kind of have an expectation about what we're going to get. We're going to get higher e-commerce sales, especially with brick and mortars closing, some of those key days like Black Friday, even places where stores are open. You see Walmart, Target, they are closing on, Thanksgiving. You get them closing there, which presumably those days will shift over to e-commerce as well. So from your standpoint, Ashley, if you look at, say, blast back to last year, and when you're going through holiday planning with clients and companies and the strategies you put in place there, how much different are those strategies this year compared to years past?
I'd say the strategy itself hasn't evolved much. It's a similar channel and marketing mix. I would say what is a little different this year is the sheer volume. E-commerce has just absolutely skyrocketed this year. Not only due to the typical growth that we've been seeing and the slow decline in brick and mortar retail that's been ongoing for some time, but there's just been astronomical growth this year in light of the pandemic. And so we've basically seen this massive jump from brick and mortar, in particular during the lockdowns, to e-commerce. And I think we've seen about 5+ years of growth within a quarter in e-commerce. So the one thing that I would say has changed this year is more people are online than ever. More people are shopping online than ever before. I think a lot of these shifts in consumer and buying behavior are here to stay beyond the pandemic. And the way that this will come into play this holiday season from a marketing perspective and a consumer perspective is we've always seen a spike in costs per click and conversion during this time because of the competition. And what I would say is the competition is going to be heavier than ever. So as a brand, you have to very carefully plan your spending and your budget, how and when you're going to spend and why. And if you're a smaller brand, you might not be able to compete with some of the bigger brands on some of the classic channels. So you should perhaps be thinking about other earned channels or perhaps other less used paid channels that might be a great mix for you to reach your target demographic.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of these questions, Ashley, which were queued up for me anyways, right? Some of those channels that smaller companies can get onto and things like that. But let's actually, I was going to say that for later, but let's actually talk about that a little bit right now if we can, since we're on it. So you mentioned it's going to be harder for some smaller retailers to compete with some of the bigger guys, and they might want to find some of those alternate channels. Let's take it from two different approaches. Let's do from a search side and then from a social side. Do you have any recommendations for some of those channels where they might be able to get that win from? And let's start with the search side. I'm presuming that it might be like Bing or alternate search engines other than Google, but you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. But could we start from the search side and then say, what are some of those channels you were talking about?
Certainly. Yeah. I think on search, there's a lot of opportunity beyond, leading engines like Google. I think Bing is certainly a good option, in particular, depending on the demographic you're looking to reach. I don't think you should cut Google out of your marketing mix, though, because in particular, when we get to lower funnel initiatives and conversion-based initiatives, which we're going to see more and more of around the holidays, I think search is a key component. And I think during that time of year, search is actually more important than ever when it comes to any sort of paid digital initiatives. So I definitely think that people are increasingly going online to literally search and plan their purchases. And there's a number of ways to go about this beyond traditional keyword-based campaigns, thinking more from a content perspective and an offsite SEO perspective. One thing that I've seen that works really well are holiday gift guides. So if you're a brand and you want to highlight some of your specific products that would make great stocking stuffers or gifts throughout the holiday season, putting together a gift guide, even if you're only hosting it on your own site and optimizing it for specific keywords, could help you rank organically in search. Again, this is a great tactic for smaller businesses that might have limited budgets, that perhaps can't compete on specific keywords beyond their branded keywords or long tail keywords in their category. But yeah, I think Bing is a great option. I don't think Google can be out for the count. I think it definitely has to be a good part of everyone's marketing mix. And then another strategy that you can incorporate into that is if you have created a gift guide and you are hosting on your own site, are there other influencers or bloggers or perhaps affiliate marketers that you could get to point links back to your gift guide and engage them in that way as well? And then, like I said, perhaps you should also put in specific campaigns on your category. If you have a specific item, and you want people to discover your product when they're looking for that type of item in that category, you should definitely think about more of those types of keyword campaigns versus just branded keywords.
Very good. And how about on the social side as well? So obviously you have your traditional players, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now. As my 40 plus year old self just kind of shrugged when I said TikTok as well. I'm just the old man here. But you have your traditional players like the Facebook, the Instagrams. Are you seeing more competition or expecting more competition this year from some of those larger retailers there? And if so, do those smaller retailers need to shift their strategy to places like Pinterest or kind of these, I would say lesser known, because Pinterest is not lesser known, but maybe lesser thought about channels for marketing? Or is it just using the money, your budget in a little bit different way? How should retailers approach the social side of things?
Sure. Yeah. And you took the words right out of my mouth. When it comes to alternative channels beyond Facebook and Instagram, which again, a good part of your campaign and budgets and time and energy and effort should be spent on, in particular, in light of a lot of the different new product rollouts they've done throughout this time, such as Instagram shops and things like that. I think that getting those table stakes in place is important, but there are certainly a lot of opportunities on alternative channels in the social category like Pinterest and TikTok. TikTok in particular obviously has a larger chunk of the younger demographic. Over 41% of their users are between 16 and 24. And we're really seeing the rise of the next generation and these centennials and their purchasing power. And of course, they're a core demographic for a lot of digitally native brands. So I think that's a great channel to reach them. TikTok has a number of different placement types, ad placement types within the platform. It's pretty seamless as you're scrolling through your For You page and your feed. The ads typically blend in quite well because the vast majority of brands that are advertising on TikTok have made creative specific to TikTok. They've capitalized on a specific trend or choreography or song, or they've, in the case of e05, which was one of the first viral marketing campaigns on the platform, they've created a song or a track specifically for the channel. e05 famously created their Eyes, Lips, Face campaign, which was fantastic, not only from a brand perspective, because so many people don't realize that e05 is an acronym, but also because it was such a catchy tune. It was such a great bop. And, people wanted to make their own videos set to that track. So when taking TikTok into account, think about virality. But another important trend on the platform is TikTok made me buy it. So there is a good amount of content from a vast number of creators on the platform where they put out videos about products that they have specifically purchased because they've seen it on TikTok. This has even spilled out past TikTok onto YouTube and other channels where some of these same creators have then gone ahead and created long form video content about the products and reviewed them. This is important for many reasons, and brands could capitalize on this opportunity in many different ways. Either you could proactively reach out to some of those creators and send them free product in turn for a review, hopefully an unbiased one, or you could create your own content from your own branded page akin to a review in that sort of format so it looks more similar to the organic content on the platform that's typically well received by that audience. Or of course, you could just put your own native ads within the app that are still interesting, engaging, short form, fun, and of course in the vertical format that they're shot in, if it's a video in-stream ad. So I think TikTok is a huge opportunity, in particular for any brands that are looking to reach the younger demographic. And beyond TikTok, you hit the nail on the head with Pinterest. One of the great things about Pinterest beyond gift guides, which it's such a beautiful visual platform, it naturally lends itself to gift guides. And of course, it also skews towards women as far as the demographic on the platform goes. And women have a lot of purchasing power as consumers in the United States. So that's a really big market. A lot of women are the head of household as far as purchasing decisions and consumerism goes across the country. A lot of women are often the ones planning the gifts for their families, for the holidays. So often they're the ones researching and finding gifts and purchasing gifts. So it's a great time to engage with women on that platform who are making a lot of these decisions. And the other thing that's interesting about Pinterest specifically is their search feature and their visual search feature. It's, again, a great way for people to find your product or similar products by literally searching visually for what they're looking for or a product similar to what they're looking for. And search volumes on that platform are higher than even leading search engines when it specifically comes to holiday. And they're also occurring earlier than ever. This year, we've seen a spike on holiday search as early as April.
Wow.
Yeah, that's another important thing to think about. If you're a brand, is that a lot of people do their research or they do their homework before converting and making a purchase. And this is very common in e-commerce because obviously, if you're in a traditional brick and mortar setting, you can pick up the item that you're thinking about purchasing. You can feel it. You can read the instructions on the back of the box. You can compare it to other items in the store. Perhaps you can ask a sales associate questions about it or an expert who's there. And then over time, we saw that trend evolve where a lot of consumers did their homework online before going in store to make a purchase. And then we've seen this come full circle where now overwhelmingly consumers are purchasing online and researching online. And this also brings me to another important point beyond the channel mix specifically, is also this is where reviews come into play. But yeah, I mean, search volume has been higher than ever on Pinterest, like I said, above even the leading search engine. And so over 77% year over year from April 2019 to April 2020. So people have been home. They've been bored in the house, or in the house bored, as they would say on TikTok. And they've been planning and preparing for the holidays, because perhaps that's also something to look forward to in what has otherwise been a fairly difficult year for a lot of people.
Very detailed answer, and I'm going to give it right back to you on something less detailed and more vague and probably more difficult for you to answer. So I'm going to give you a completely hypothetical here and say, everything you just said, I'm a smaller retailer and I'm trying to compete against, other smaller retailers as well as the big box stores or those larger companies. And I have a, XYZ budget on social media to spend on ads. So I know that maybe I'm going to have a little bit less luck on Facebook and Instagram. I'm looking maybe putting a little bit more into Pinterest or some of these other channels. This is going to be completely dependent on the type of company. I know size of it, products are selling, everything here. But if you wanted to take a shot and say, okay, if you're a smaller company, you think you're going to really face some steep competition from an ad side, at least from a spend side on social. And you normally say we'll just say 70% Facebook ads, 20% Instagram ads, 10% other. How much would you shift that this year? Does that 70 maybe just go to 60 and you take that extra 10% and roll it into the other category? Or how drastic do you think that shift should be for some of these companies this year?
Sure. So I think there's a couple things, especially if we're talking to a smaller business or newer brand. I think, one, if you've already launched and you have a good amount of data, the number one thing you should do is try and find more efficiency in your campaigns. You already know that this time of year, it's going to cost more than it would any other time of year to reach your ideal customer or even your existing customers. So you should sort of get your house in order as much as possible before even thinking about budgeting on the different platforms and how you're going to break down these paid campaigns. So what I mean by that, do some database cleanup. Think about your existing customers and how you can reach them and how you can convert them. Another great way to think of that way would be perhaps a discount or a refer a friend. There's been a lot of research this year that indicates shoppers are looking more and more towards having a discount or a sale before purchasing. Again, because it's been so volatile, there's been a lot of economic uncertainty and of course, a lot of people out of work. So what can you do to optimize basically everything before you even launch? Can you clean up your database? Can you take a look at your earned channels like life cycle, whether it's email or others, if you have, let's say, a chat bot or things like that. So I would say get that house in order. And that's really important because obviously in a lot of ways, life cycle or email goes hand in hand with social and paid social. Because if you have a really great, robust customer database and list, either that you're pulling from your e-commerce platform, your analytics platform, or even just from your email service provider platform, you can leverage that data to create really interesting lookalike audiences, nested lookalike audiences. Even you can exclude those audiences from other prospecting campaigns. So you're, again, being super efficient with your ad dollars. The way I would see it is you should always consider budgeting based on what your goals are. So at a minimum to grow, you should always be investing at least 20% of your revenue back into paid campaigns from a marketing perspective to ensure you're always growing. And I think another interesting thing is to think about the breakdown, generally speaking, when it comes to prospecting versus retargeting. You always have to be refilling your funnel in order to continuously see a good return when it comes to remarketing. If you just double down on remarketing and you don't refill that funnel and bring new people into it, well, guess what? It's eventually going to dry up. Of course, during the holidays, you should probably, in order to find that efficiency, spend more time and more money on retargeting versus prospecting. But in order to get to a point where that's sustainable throughout this period and this season, you need to have built a good number of these prospecting audiences beforehand. in an ever crowded world where we're served more and more and more ad impressions every day, it takes more touch points with a potential new customer or consumer to actually get them to convert and purchase with your brand. So thinking about that, you should probably have already ramped up your investment and your ad spending well before the holiday season so that you can, again, have some of those efficiencies in those prospecting campaigns before we see this massive spike throughout the holiday season. But what I would say this year, what that comes down to with what you mentioned is perhaps shifting more of your social budget into search, because generally speaking, social, of course, from a paid perspective, can be an extremely performance-driven channel with all the analytics that are now built into the vast majority of the different platforms. But that being said, search is generally speaking a lower funnel initiative versus a top of funnel initiative, which social can be. And that's because, someone's literally opening up a search engine and looking for either specifically your brand or your product category versus they're on a social platform. They're scrolling through their feed and looking at content from their friends and family. And then they happen to then see a product from a brand they might like. So perhaps think about increasing your search budget this holiday season, even if it means shifting some of those funds away from social.
So you mentioned retargeting and being able to refill that funnel, right? So if you're just picking them out of the barrel, eventually you're going to run out of things to pick out of the barrel. So you got to put more in there. Is there any validity this year where we know competition is just going to be ramped up from the online standpoint to say, okay, if you're smaller and you're trying to find a quick and easy win, or maybe a more logical place to kind of double down and put some money, do you think retargeting, and you just talked about search there for a second, but do you think retargeting and saying, okay, I need to maximize every single dollar I can out of anyone who's either clicked on an email or come to my site that I've been able to capture, and retarget those people to try to maximize that versus casting a wider net and just trying to hope that you're going top of the funnel and bringing people in? Like, if you had to double down one way or the other, do you have a preferred method this year versus other years, or is it the same thing every single year and you stand by that? What would you say to that?
Sure. I'd say, again, it's pretty similar, generally speaking, of what you would do each year. But if you've already done a great job this year and you've regularly prospected new audiences and you've done all sort of the data cleaning I mentioned, and you've gotten any of your earned activities in order, you've had a great content calendar from an organic perspective that's led to increased engagement with your customer base. Perhaps you've rolled out a loyalty or refer a friend program, perhaps with a small reward for your existing customer and their new friend and potential new customer that they're referring to you. And then, of course, you've tried to reach everyone on own channels like email. Then at that point, it makes sense to double down on retargeting. But again, the competition is going to be stiff, but there's a lot of things you can do to try and ensure the success of those campaigns. So one of the things beyond increasing your budget that would be important and doing all that legwork on your other earned and owned channels is ensuring that the content or the copy or the creative or the exact product that you're serving the consumer is relevant. So one of the great things to leverage on Facebook to this end is dynamic product ads. So if someone's already been on their site, they've already browsed a couple different collections, or they've honed in on a specific product page, it's really effective to show them that exact product. And so dynamic product ads are the way to go to automate that. And then similarly, you can actually be really specific and direct in your copy. One of the things that I've seen that works really well is literally using the word you or your. So for example, a shopper is browsing your site, they land on a pair of jeans, they don't purchase, maybe they even added to cart, but they didn't convert. Well, you could serve them a dynamic product ad showing them that exact pair of jeans. And you could say something like, don't forget your new pair of jeans, or we like these for you, or check out your new look. And that sort of personalization works quite well. Personalization is something we talk about a lot and is definitely something you could carry over to other channels and strategies. And I think it's increasingly more important. we have the data, we have the information. We may as well, again, make that ad as specific as possible within reason so that it's not to the point of being creepy, where it's more helpful and interesting and engaging to the consumer. So they really feel like you get them. And you're basically their shopping assistant at this point, as opposed to a nuisance that they just want to quickly scroll past. So that's another way to be efficient with your dollars.
Very good example. I'm going to come back at you with one thing here. You mentioned a couple of times, right? Hey, clean your data, make sure you're buttoned up and you've got some sort of statistical reason for doing things. I'm sure you've lived this world before where you talk to clients or you meet people and they're just not there yet, right? Maybe they're a solopreneur and they are kind of run the show by themselves. And, there's only so many hours in a day. And they don't necessarily know, they don't have a handle on what they need to do, but they know they need to do ads and things like that. So if you take someone and call them relatively blind and just say, okay, this is where I think you're going to get the best bang for the buck. And if I had to put my money, that's where I would put it, not knowing anything else. Where's that one place you would probably start your targeting approach at?
Sure. So it's definitely always going to vary based on industry, subvertical, demographic. There are so many different factors. But again, this basically comes down to them doing their homework. If you don't have a good amount of existing customer data, then do research. Try and understand who you think your ideal customer profile is, what that looks like, and how you can find and reach that group of people most effectively. So if you don't have the existing data, create personas of the different types of clients or consumers or customers that your brand, product, or service might have. So do the research, determine who those individuals might be, and then based off of that, go to those channels to find and reach them. And again, if you're a smaller, newer business, there's so many different things you can do from an earned or organic perspective before you dump money into paid channels. Of course, we're seeing diminishing returns for those efforts. It's increasingly overwhelmingly getting to the point that you need to pay to play on those channels and to get impressions served to your whole audience. However, it's also a good test case scenario. So instead of just running an A/B test between two different ad sets on a paid campaign, perhaps you could do two separate organic posts on your social channel. And based on whichever one has the most engagement organically, you then might boost that post and put a spend behind it to reach more of your existing audience or a new audience. So that's, again, another way to try and test things out, do your homework before spending a dime, and then getting more efficiency out of those ad dollars.
Very good. Very good answer. Actually, so let's talk about for a second mobile versus, I would say, laptop or desktop, but it's really laptop now. So every year, mobile takes a share of search, takes a share of overall traffic to websites. Last year, it was almost 60% of website traffic during the holidays was on mobile devices. I have this inkling that it's still going to be high. It might even gain, but there may be more people, maybe more, using laptops because we are at home and it's easier. You're used to working at home now. You have the laptops on your lap and you're just plugging away and you might be doing more shopping there. Does that factor play into your search strategy or paid social strategy at all? Or has it all just been kind of relegated to this point by now?
So you have an interesting hypothesis there. And you would think that since we're all at home versus on the go, we would see either an increase in desktop use or less of an increase in mobile. But the inverse has been true. So basically what's happened during this time is even though people are at home and in their house, they're still using their mobile devices more than ever, on average, an additional hour per person per day. So I think beyond the typical trends that we've seen year over year, the past several years with the rise and dominance of mobile, again, the pandemic has sort of upended the apple cart in favor of mobile. So I would say mobile is more important than ever. Everything that you do and create and put out there should be optimized for mobile. Everything that you design and create should be a mobile first experience. And there's a lot of different trends in the industry and ways that brands could capitalize on this. one of the most interesting things that we've seen has been the rise in native apps for brands. So there's a great number of different partners that do this and that integrate even with Shopify and can make it really easy for you to stand up your own native mobile app from your Shopify store, sometimes within minutes. We have some great partners that do this. And so this is something that a lot of different brands should be thinking about, and whether they leverage a solution like TapCart or others in order to reach these mobile users, because that native shopping experience is typically always going to be better even than a mobile optimized site, in particular, because once you get into that native shop environment, you can also then leverage push notifications. So beyond email, beyond even SMS, you can send out those push notifications. And so, the behavior that we're seeing that's occurred during this lockdown or these extended rolling lockdowns in this pandemic has been that users, despite the fact that they're in their homes, have still been just using the smallest, most convenient devices that they have on them.
Very nice insights. I love it. I think it's so useful for anyone who might be listening to this to kind of look at that and maybe had the same hypothesis that I might have had and just seen something completely different from it. So I love it. You came prepared, Ashley. I love that. I want to talk just for a second about kind of those key days, those tentpole days. So Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, where you just see increased sales. Expect the same thing this year. But I was talking to someone on Amazon Strategies and paid ads, and they said, you know what, usually those days, it's actually cheaper to advertise on those days because people are either inundated elsewhere or there's other things they're looking for. And he had a bunch of different reasons for it. From your standpoint, and search and social might be a little bit different, so I'm going to ask you to kind of wade into each of those. But if you're a retailer looking at doing paid stuff on both search and social on those key tentpole days, is the advice typically to double down on those, to pull back on your spend a little bit because all the prep work that has gone into those days already? Can you walk us through that a little bit if you would?
Certainly. So it depends on where you're at with your business. Number one, when you go about setting up those campaigns, you should also be very careful with the parameters that you set and the budgets that you set to ensure that you don't overspend your budget, which is a very common issue that occurs for a good number of advertisers on a variety of platforms if they don't set up the right stopgaps or measures when they're actually building out their campaigns. And that could be a really nasty surprise, even if you have some great results, that you've well overspent what you had so carefully set aside and planned to reach your customers. So that would be the number one tip, is to try and ensure that you don't overspend. The next tip I would say is the competition is so stiff beyond for the actual advertising placements on the platform and the spike in costs per that we see across the board. It's also stiff from a promotional perspective. So if you're going to put a decent ad spend into promoting your products on that day, you should ensure that you have a great deal or sale that your customers are actually going to be really excited about shopping. Because otherwise, they're primed to expect on what have now become retail holidays, these amazing jaw-dropping deals. And if you don't have a compelling offer, they're probably going to go elsewhere. So again, these are things that can be done outside of just the budgeting and the bidding day of or what you set in motion beforehand. These are the sorts of things that you can plan from your inventory and merchandising perspectives. So I think the offer is really important. I think overspending can be an issue. And then again, I think those earned channels are really important. So something that we haven't talked about today that I think is really important is SMS marketing and advertising. So again, more similar to email and a life cycle channel, it's much more affordable than some of the other search and social channels. And it's extremely effective, especially because we just talked about how everyone is on their phone and on mobile. So if you can send a really fun, interesting, maybe even emoji-laden text message that's going to resonate with your consumer, that might lead to a conversion more readily than an ad that they might just scroll past, that they don't even stop the scroll to take in and see. So that's something that I think is important. And then again, if you're a smaller brand and you're not at the point where you have an ability to compete at that level, again, maybe you think about these alternative channels and other things you can do that could move the needle. So beyond retargeting, generally speaking, or the dynamic product ads that we talked about, I would say it's also important to think about cart abandonment campaigns. So there are so many different funnels you could set up within your retargeting and remarketing funnel, right? And you have to, again, think about what is the lowest hanging fruit and how can you be as efficient as possible with your ad spend. So one of the absolute lowest hanging fruits within the retargeting funnel is going to be that cart abandonment segment. So you should think about how can you save that cart and get it back on track and get that customer through your digital door to actually complete that transaction. So either do specific retargeting on cart abandonment users in that segment, or even think about leveraging a messenger solution to that end, like Octane AI. Octane overarchingly generates more revenue for any of our clients that leverages the tool over time, because sending someone a Facebook message on their messenger is often more effective than maybe an email that they're not going to open. If they saw the Facebook ad, they clicked through Facebook, they ended up on the site, they abandon their cart, and then they get a message within the same platform, it's a little bit more direct than, again, just hoping that they stop the scroll in their feed. So that's another great option that brands should consider and think about. And on the subject of Octane AI, they've actually rolled out this absolutely amazing new feature, which is a shoppable quiz. And this is something we've seen a lot of excitement with from the brands that we work with, and a lot of great results with their customer base. It's particularly compelling when you have different products or product lines, and you can have someone really go through this experience to determine what the best product is for them and make a recommendation. They're much more likely to convert. So again, that's something else that brands could try beyond the traditional channels in order to drive sales and purchases and also save those cart abandons.
Very good answers. And just to remind the audience that, of course, you can always do cart abandonment, SMS, and Facebook Messenger directly through the Omnisend platform as well. So just let everyone know. Not a sales pitch, but it's there.
Absolutely.
So I think you brought up a really good point about SMS, because I think that's something that I sign up for a lot of SMS marketing messages, but it certainly helps on some of those tentpole days as well, where you might not want to send an email for a last chance reminder, sales going to expire, or whatever, because there's a time consideration there. Where SMS, you pretty much remove that time consideration. You're talking about minutes versus potentially hours based on what that user is doing. So really good example there. Certainly tying in, you can tie the SMS messages right into the same workflow as cart abandonment as well. So you can kind of piggyback and say, okay, you're signed up for SMS. We'll include SMS into the cart abandonment workflow as well. So a lot of different options for retailers there. So I think you brought up some really good points from that standpoint. So thank you for that. Ashley, I'm going to get you one last question here on paid stuff. And this is more of a pretend your boss isn't listening, right? And I always envision like grabbing someone by the shoulder and being like, give me the code, man. But if I ask you to cut through, like, quote unquote, cut through the BS and just do it thing, what is the one thing you would just want to grab someone by the collar, shake and be like, just do this for the holidays?
There are so many things, and it depends on where someone's at in their journey. But the number one, I think, that is most exciting for us on the agency side is working with a client who gets it. So others might think, oh, well, we're the experts. You need to lean on us for all your marketing expertise. And of course, yes, we're the experts, and we're here to help and support and educate and get you to your goals and where you want to be. But as far as I'm concerned, the more educated the client is and the better they understand the differences between the types of channels and the channel mix, maybe not into the nuances and into the weeds of each individual platform and how to set up and optimize a campaign. But if they know at least enough to be dangerous, I think they'll make more effective decisions that really do enable agency experts to drive the best results for them at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it's important that they understand the difference between, let's say, search, social, SEO, email, and other lifecycle options. And it's also good for them to have an understanding of the platforms that are available out there so that they're aware of that. Because oftentimes when a client engages with an agency, If they've already been in business for a little while, they probably have specific platforms or tools that they're leveraging. And I think it's important to regularly review those and to ensure that you have the best fit solution for your needs. To your point about Omnisend's features, I think it's absolutely incredible as we see different features rolled out and developed. It's great when you're working, for example, with a Hawke Media and a lifecycle marketing manager on our end. If they can leverage a platform like Omnisend, where they have everything in one, it leads to a far more seamless experience for the customer, where they can manage all of those workflows in one platform versus several. And that's probably different. If you had several platforms for those solutions, that's multiple different line items and relationships you have to think about with your SaaS provider versus one. And it's also much easier for the marketing manager to look at and report on and be accountable to the results. So I think know your stuff, know what the different marketing channels are, at least generally speaking, and then have a great arsenal or toolkit of platforms and tools that you leverage to drive those results, and just stay abreast of, even if it's just listening to your agency that you've engaged with, what the latest and greatest is in the ecosystem and what tools you should be using to achieve those goals.
Yeah, it's a really good point you brought up as well, because you mentioned a couple different times in the conversation today about having clean data and understanding and sifting through it and understanding exactly what you're looking at. And, if you have multiple tools under the same platform, it certainly makes that easier because you can see that. And certainly, I'm not here to sell Omnisend. Well, I kind of am, but, do retargeting through the Omnisend platform on Google Ads or Facebook. All that stuff's in one platform makes it easy. And then if they're using a agency to kind of manage that stuff like Hawke, it makes your job easier as well, because you guys you don't have to necessarily balance 5 different platforms and pull that data together. So I would envision it makes your consulting that much more better for the end user, the retailer there as well. So I really like what you're saying there. Actually, we got a couple minutes left here. We always ask our guests where they digest business content from, right? So whether it's audiobooks or books or websites, podcasts, whatever it might be, where do you go for business information?
Sure. So many different sources. Number one, we have such great relationships and partners with a good number of the platforms like Omnisend and Google, Facebook, TikTok, Snap, and others. They regularly directly send us reports and industry trends. So of course, I review any of the materials that our partners send our way and share them with our team, so we stay abreast of what's going on in those different areas. And especially as things shift this year, we've seen such great change across the board in so many aspects of digital. So it's been important to stay on top of those. In addition to that, my colleague Baron on our marketing team produces this really amazing report weekly. He started it during the pandemic in light of these great shifts that I mentioned. So we put out the Hawke Media special report every week. That's definitely a go-to source for me personally. And then there are a good number of industry newsletters that I subscribe to that I just love, that I feel are really well researched and well written. So I personally really like Morning Brew. Morning Brew has several versions. They have Retail Brew, Tech Brew. They have Light Roast on Sundays and so on and so forth. So I appreciate the entire family of brews that's out there, in addition to the Future Party, Lean Lux. So, our conversation today was really directed around paid search and paid social, given that that's my background. But we've touched a little bit on all these steps about how important cleaning is and database management and email and lifecycle. And that's such a big part of it. And like I just mentioned, a lot of my go-to resources are actually newsletters that I subscribe to on email that I just love. And they come right to my inbox and they have the insights I'm looking for. So anyone who's listening, don't discount email and lifecycle as a channel. It's key. And again, it's an own channel. So those are all impressions you don't have to pay for, right? Once you have someone in your database. So that's always great. And then beyond that, I think Exploding Topics and also Google Trends are other great places that I go to online to look at data and information. So yeah, I think those are all good starting points for anyone looking to learn more about e-commerce.
Yeah, that's great. Those newsletters, Retail Brew and things like that, I obviously sign up for them, but they're mentioned a lot here. So newsletters it's funny because they were one of the things that everyone used, and it became, no one wanted another newsletter. And all of a sudden, the last couple of years, everyone wants newsletters all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just a sign of the times, right? It's quicker to digest a wide scale of information there. So Really good things. Last one for you. Ashley, today, if you could have one meal for the rest of your life, which meal are you going to choose?
Oh my goodness. I am a foodie. That's a really, really tough call. I don't know if I could choose just one meal, but if I could choose only one cuisine, because I've thought about this extensively, I would probably pick Italian food just because, you have pasta, pizza, you have meat and cheese.
That doesn't count, Ashley.
Yeah.
You got to pick a meal.
Perhaps let's go with pizza then.
Okay.
But because I'm Canadian, I really love pineapple on pizza. A lot of people don't realize we invented Hawaiian pizza. The name is a bit of a misnomer. So if I had to pick maybe just one thing, perhaps it would be pineapple pizza, Hawaiian pizza.
Was it invented in Hawaii, Ontario?
If only. It was invented in Ontario. And a lot of people don't know, we do have a London, Ontario. We have a Paris, Ontario. I don't think we have a Hawaii, Ontario.
I've spent some time in London, Ontario, Ashley, and I cannot tell those stories here. But if we ever engage in a drink once this whole pandemic lifts at a conference or something, I'll tell you some wild London stories.
I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Ashley, any questions for me today?
No, thank you so much for having me and thank you for your time.
Thank you. So Ashley, we'll have info in the episode description, how to get a hold of you and Hawke. But if you verbally want to throw that out for us, we'd love that for you. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to do so?
Absolutely. So like you said, my name's Ashley Scorpio. It's spelt how it sounds, like the horoscope sign. And it's just the plain old Ashley, the regular way, ASHLEY. My handle is the same on every channel. It's just at Ashley Scorpio. So whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Telegram or all the grams, Snap, Pinterest, it's always just Ashley Scorpio, just one word.
Very good. So we'll have that in the description. So if anyone's curious, feel free to shoot down there. Ashley Scorpio, everyone, Galactic Superhero and VP of Partnerships at Hawke Media. Ashley, thank you very much for your time today. Enjoy the conversation, the insights, and to everyone listening, thank you for yours as well. If you have any questions, comments, or interested in sharing your e-commerce or email marketing story, please email us at podcast@omnisend.com. Until next time, have a great day and be kind to one another.